Good evening, peace and blessings. I am your brother, Leroy Muhammad, representing the family staff of the Philadelphia 10,000 Fearless. Tonight, we're going to enter into our second of 4 installments in conjunction with the Philadelphia Office of Violence Prevention, the Urban Affairs Coalition of Philadelphia, and Muhammad's Mosque number 12. Backstage tonight, we have a star cast of presenters who will be out, panelists, I'll say, be out speaking to us tonight. We have our chairperson, Anthony Muhammad, who'll be coming on a little bit later on this evening. He wasn't able to do the intro tonight, so I had the dubious distinction of coming to do so. We are going to have the presenters to come on, and while they're on, the chat room will be open. So if there's any questions or comments that you would like to make inside of the chat room, feel free to do so. A little history on the 10,000 Fearless here in Philadelphia. We started out in 2016, 2017, somewhere in the middle of the 2 years. And we began right there at Mosque number 12, first organizing in meetings, getting our family staff together. And then we ventured out to begin to do a soup kitchen and clothing giveaway in front of the mosque at 2508 North Broad Street. And we began to gather momentum. In 2018, we were able to secure a grant to help us with our administrative needs and to get some of the other items that we need to be active in terms of our presentation through the Office of Violence Prevention, which has been very helpful in keeping us afloat. We had some beautiful programs in the past years. We started out with a basketball barbershop talks at the historic Church of the Advocate here in Philadelphia on Diamond Street. We went from that to the Boys to Men conference held by our own Philadelphian and very much loved, known as the math doctor here, Brother Shahid Muhammad. We went from that to a session on conflict resolution held by our own Geraldo Muhammad. We had a 6-week, maybe even 7-week session here held by Captain Dennis Muhammad of the Peacekeepers, which included CPR certification. We had Brother David Muhammad, known throughout the country on the subject of proper handling of people in conflict resolution. And we had a 6-week martial arts training session held by our own in the Delaware Valley area, Professor James Sims Muhammad. So we've been active in pushing this, and then COVID took in. So we had to take a few steps backwards to take a giant step forward. So tonight, after our first session, which was titled Violence Averted and Accepting the New Paradigm, which took place on August the 20th, tonight will be our second session, which most of you have already seen. The title is called Trauma, the Walking Time Bomb. So with that, you're not going to get too much ado from me. I would like to bring on our illustrious brother who was very helpful and on point with our last session, and he will be our what's that word for it? Well, our chief panelist, but also facilitator. That's the word, facilitator. Our own brother Jibril Muhammad. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. Buckle your seatbelts. We're about to take off. Brother Jibril, thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Leroy. Peace, peace, and blessings, family. Welcome to part 2 of Violence Averted, Accepting a New Paradigm. Where do we go from here? Trauma, the Walking Time Bomb. I am your not so illustrious and humble host and moderator, Brother Jibril Muhammad, aka Jibrilliant Engineer. I am a proud and young FOI, meaning the Fruit of Islam, of the Nation of Islam here, Muhammad Mosque number 12 in Philadelphia. I am also the proud director of engineering for Original Man Scientific, an up-and-coming Black-owned research and development company geared towards delivering the advantages of R&D to your community. I'm also the proud co-host of the STEM Files, which is the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. All right. For more information on those, you can definitely follow Original Man Scientific and the STEM Files on social media, primarily Instagram. You can find Original Man Scientific at OMANSCI_, and the STEM Files at THESTEMFILES. But less about that and more about the illustrious panel that I'm about to bring on. Again, we are discussing trauma this evening, and we have a great program together for you, laced with a bunch of questions. And I'm going to have our panelists unmute themselves and bring their screens on right now. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I like how we synchronize that. All praise due to Allah. So thank y'all so much for coming again. Some of us, older faces, and then some of us new faces. Tonight, again, we're discussing trauma, the walking time bomb. Family, for those watching, make sure to like, comment, and share tonight's content with your friends, family, dog, fish, everybody, because this is where we are discussing one of the many things that may plague our community, but not only here, around America, but also some solutions and things to move forward, understanding where we came from, but also being able to move forward into a brighter future. So with that, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Brother Dante Muhammad, and then going down to our brother Lamont from there, finishing us off. So Brother Dante, what's going on, good brother?
Yes, sir. How you doing, family? Like I said, my name, like Brother Jabril said, my name is Brother Dante Muhammad. I'm a member of the Nation of Islam. I'm also a graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, where I majored in mechanical engineering.
Yes, sir. Awesome, awesome. Sister Zuna Queen, what's going on?
Peace and love, everybody. My name is Camille Bell. I also go by Zuna. I am a mother of two amazing sons. I am a rebel and revolutionary. I am also the owner at Answer the Bell, where I consult with my peers ages 25 to 40 on mental wellness. I am also a community activist with my hands in the dirt over at North Philly Peace Park. Peace and love.
That's what I'm talking about. Praise be to Allah. We're going to slide over to my big brother Gabriel. Jabril Gabriel's a bit of a connection there for those who know the language. Yes, sir. Brother Gabriel, what's going on, good brother? Peace.
Peace of Black Power family, Brother Gabe Bryant, organizer, activist. I've been working in mental health for about 15 years, and also on the roads to education. My work really focuses on mass incarceration and those who are involved in the prison. And yeah, happy to be here, brother. It's an honor.
Praise Allah. Thank you so much again for being here, good brother. Looking forward to you adding value to the conversation. Now we got to go back over to the second self of God right now. Sister Jasmine X, what's going on, Queen? How are you this evening?
Yes, sir. Peace, family. Sister Jasmine X, Philly native, born and raised, Temple University graduate, study economics and religious studies. I'm a writer, poet / rapper, community activist, and I am a Vanguard MGT in the Nation of Islam, working for the mission of our people, especially teaching ourselves self-love, and especially our women. So.
Praise be to Allah. I know y'all heard she slid rapper in there real slight. We might hit that a little bit later in the show. She slid it in there, but we're not going to let her get away with that. All praise be to Allah. But last but not least, my big brother in the ministry class of Muhammad Muslim 12, Brother Lamont Muhammad. What's going on, good brother? Peace, beloved.
Hey, peace, family, peace and love. Assalamu alaikum. I'm happy to be on the show on this segment. Again, Brother Lamont Muhammad, educator, student in the ministry, community activist, Temple University graduate, Lincoln University graduate, where I received my master's degree. And I'm just happy to be here, a lover of our people, an advocate for the youth, mentor, and all those good things. But I'm just happy to be on this second segment with these great people to have this great discussion. So thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. All praises to Allah. Family, again, tonight is Trauma, the Walking Time Bomb. You just heard from our panelists, them introduce themselves. We are jam-packed and ready to go. Tonight's goal is not so much to dwell on trauma as something that we have all experienced at one point, maybe experiencing right now, but to unpack it and understand really the source, but then moving forward past that. So hopefully we're able to do that at a high level, and we want to get into some questions revolving around that. So as we begin, I really don't believe in doing anything without having a general understanding of its definition. So I want to give a general definition on what trauma is, and then we'll go on and move on from there. So according to Google, one definition is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. Another medical definition, this is interesting, is physical injury. It's interesting how physical injury can be related to trauma. So without further ado, we want to start with our brother Dante and get a bit scientific with it. So big bro, if you can, what happens to the brain when the fight or flight response in the brain is constantly activated?
Yes, sir. So I'm I'm not a psychologist, so
Right.
I'll leave that to the experts. But first, I think I want to start that answer just by kind of understanding part of that definition that you said, Brother Jabril. And there's a specific word in that definition that I really want to focus on, and that word is distress. And I'm going to define stress, but first we have to understand what the prefix dis or dis means. And when we look at that prefix, it means apart, asunder, away, utterly, or having a privative, negative, or reversing force. And as a engineering graduate, that negative or reversing force that really kind of speaks out to me, because when you talk about stress in general is a force. If you in the engineering sciences, stress is force over area. So when you're talking about distress, it's a force that is going in the opposite direction. So when we're talking about these experiences or these distressing experiences, these experiences that provide some type of stress or some type of force on your psyche, we have to see what that's really doing to us. And especially when you're encountering that distressing experience over and over and over and over again. In the engineering sciences, when we want to test a specimen, we usually have it could be any material, it could be metal, it could be lead, etc. But when you have, like, let's say, a rectangular bar or a cylindrical bar, you put in some type of device and you'll apply stress to it. And the purpose for you applying stress to this particular specimen is that you want to see how it will hold up, right? So you want to see what the maximum yield strength is. And there's something called the stress strain curve. And these stress strain curves really show you how a certain material deforms. So you have three critical parts in the stress strain curve. You have the initial part, which is where stress and strain are directly correlated to each other. You have the yielding part, and then you have the failure part. So when you're in the first part of that curve, the stress is directly proportional to the strain, which means that when the stress increases, the strain increases. But when the stress decreases, the strain also decreases. But there's a point in a curve where you get to a yield point, where you get to the yield strength. And when you go past that yield, the specimen or whatever you're testing becomes deformed. And you can't,
classic deformation. Come on.
And you can't go back to your original form, right? So once you go past that yield point, it begins to deform, it begins to change shape. But when you take the stress off of it, it doesn't go back to how it was originally. It stays to that deformed state. But let's take it a step further. When you're still at that yielding point, if you keep putting more stress and more stress and more stress on it, eventually it fails, it breaks. So when we're looking at the conditions inside of our community, and we see that a lot of our young people, a lot of our older people, a lot of our children are going through so many distressing experiences, at what point do they yield? At what point do we deform? At what point do we fracture? At what point do we break? And in order to kind of deal with these things, there's different coping mechanisms that we talk about in psychology to kind of help deal with this stress. But if we don't know how to properly cope, if we don't know how to properly get back to our original form before the stress occurred, then we'll eventually break. And that's where you see mental breakdowns. That's when we see a lot of the craziness that's happening in our community, because our people are literally breaking down from the stress that is being applied to them on their everyday lives. So when we discuss this fight or flight response, you know, when a distressing experience occurs over and over again, the brain remembers, right? The brain stores experiences and stores memories. So if let's say hypothetically, if someone was abused their entire life, and words were attached to that physical abuse, and they hear their words in that adult life, that's going to trigger some type of response in the brain, because the brain has stored said experiences. So when we hear certain things or when we see certain things, the world looks at us and say, oh, well, why are they acting this way, or why is this happening, or why are they reacting the way that they are? Well, they have to understand is that we've gone through so many distressing experiences. It's an innate response at this point. It's something that's been so ingrained in us that now when we see it and we experience it, we automatically lash out, and we may not even know why we're doing it. But these are just the mechanisms of the brain. And like I said, as I was mentioning before, one of the things about that stress is that you don't go back to the original form. Now, when the brain stores memories and experiences, your brain is elastic, right? So your brain changes as you get older, and it changes over time. So each new experience actually has a physical effect on your brain, because your brain is now trying to conform, or is now forming from these new experiences that you're gaining over time. So this whole trauma and this whole distressing thing is really a deep science when you really look at how it's really affecting our psyche, and how it's really changing our mental, is really changing our brain. So that's how I would kind of answer that question. What happens or what causes that fight or flight is the physiological and psychological changes that we are undergoing as we're experiencing these distressing experiences.
Ooh, family, this is part 2 of Violence Averted, right? Except the new paradigm. Where do we go from here? We talking trauma. For anyone who doesn't know, so I was very, very, very passionate about my bro Dante starting us off. We are both engineers, and I actually am a materials engineer by schooling. So as he's breaking down stress strain curves, he's talking about the elastic to the yield to the plastic strength, and relating that back to how thought literally shapes matter in the brain. Believe me, I'm literally over here geeking, family, and we really are starting to see a clear picture of really what's happening to us in our community, but anyone who's going through trauma cyclically over and over and over again, whether it might be small or large. But I know now I got to go to my sister Jasmine, because I know I saw you nodding and everything, but is there anything you might want to add as it pertains to what brother said, particularly unpacking the concept of fight or flight?
I just feel like that answer was amazing. And it is I'm trying to add something of value to that, because that was so electric. But it just, when I think about being in a state of fight or flight constantly, you start to be able to not be able to decipher dangerous situations from situations that aren't dangerous. They just all become dangerous to you, constantly in a state of fear. So because of that, it's like every situation you're reacting to it in an inappropriate way, because you're automatically considering the worst case scenario. You're automatically considering things, okay, it went from 100 to 0, and it really may not be, but you're not able to appropriately respond anymore because you've constantly been in this state of fear. But that's all I wanted to add to that question, because unpacking the way that thought shapes matter, that is just really to think about.
So
yes, sir.
So what I gathered from both of you, what I'm talking about is, if we have the mechanical mixed with the psychological, trauma is what occurs when we reach that point, or we reach that point where we can no longer, we're having a hard time recovering. If that plastic state is the state to where we can not so much let things roll off of us, but, you know, compensate, whether it's go to the gym, you know, continue to work, talk to family members, whatever allows to maintain that level of psychological wellness. You know, that repeated trauma gets us out of that situation. So anybody else want to add to that before we move on? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add one more thing. Just
Go
another
ahead.
thing that I thought about when you're constantly going through situations of fear and you're on edge, I feel as if it creates this state of anxiety where you now to avoid trauma. You want to avoid what you fear. So because you're constantly trying to avoid something, you're overthinking. This is what really causes overthinking. And in turn, it really causes you to not trust yourself. It causes you to not really have confidence in your decisions because you feel like you're constantly on eggshells. And so you're constantly trying to think about, okay, should I do this? Should I say this? I'm not sure. It might be bad. I don't know what the result is going to be. And you don't really have freedom anymore to be who you are because you're constantly trying to avoid something that probably won't happen. So
right.
That just was something else that you made me think of just now. Yes, sir.
Praise be for a lot. Yes, man. Anybody else want to tap in on this really quickly before we continue on to our next question?
Yeah, I'll just add on real quick, good brother. You know, there's a reason why for decades we greet each other in peace.
Come on.
We don't greet each other by saying, you know, war, brother Jabril,
Right.
chaos, brother Dante,
Right.
turmoil, sister Zuna. We don't do that. We say what? We say peace because we understand what peace does. We understand that as we're trying to navigate white supremacy and white domination, that many of us are experiencing many things that are affecting our ability to live, love, and learn. Those are the three criteria that we look at as far as trauma is concerned. It impacts our ability to live, love, and learn. And so if we're trying to negotiate ways to live every day, that is to go to work every day, ways to love, that is our intimate partner relationships, ways to learn if we're in school, right? If it impacts those three areas, we understand the ways that trauma has affected our ability. And we don't know what the other person on the street has been dealing with, has been going through, based on how white supremacy interacts in all the major institutions that we find ourselves in. And so we greet each other with peace because we understand how chaos has been a part of our daily lives. We understand how turmoil has been a part of our daily lives. And, you know, frankly, if we're being honest, you know, I remember thinking about, as far as the question of fight or flight, I was talking to my brother about that show, The Walking Dead. And not so much about the zombies, but about the so-called survivors and how
Right.
they're in constant mode of fighting these zombies or trying to get away. What does that do? It removes the ability to have rest.
Go ahead.
Eyes are always open, can't sleep. And we know
Right.
what sleep does to the body, right? To our respiratory system, to our whole cardiovascular system, our whole physical shuts down because of that. All right. Our ability to navigate what's real, mind starts playing tricks on us, right? And so if we understand fight or flight, we also understand it's our ability to be at ease because we're able to settle in. It's why sleep is so important for our daily life. And
Right.
I'll close by saying this, you know, when we began to fight as a people, that's when white folks began to have flight.
Family, again, I hope you all are engaged. You know, we're digging in. You know, we really unpacking that concept of survival versus what it means to really live. And that's where I want to kind of go. But before I do so, I want to thank our audience members, give a special shout out to my big brother and mentor, Brother David Hassan. Want to give another shout out to Sister Herrera. I'm tuning in. Another shout out to Sister Latasha. Thank you all so much. Remember, like, comment, share, drop some questions. We will be engaging audience questions. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're not just discussing this, but we're also arriving at some things we can do better as individuals, but also as a community and be able to share that going forward. So when we talk about survival versus living, you know, one of the things that has been very, very, very apparent and popular, if you will, or trending in our community as Black people, you know, Black America, is financial freedom. And, you know, obviously, you know, not only just financial freedom, the acquisition of land or just ownership as a primary proponent or conduit by which we can then graduate from survival to life. So I want to then ask this question, starting with Sister Jasmine, but then segueing to our other panelists. So what are the effects of psychological trauma on financial management, and how is that often displayed in our communities?
Yes, sir. So I first think that we should first talk about what the effects of trauma are on self-love and how we view ourselves and our self-worth. Because when we think about the different horrible experiences that we may have gone through, particularly in childhood trauma, a lot of that makes us feel unworthy, self-esteem issues as adults. It makes us feel as if we're not enough. And so in order to cope with that, it really directly impacts our financial management skills. And so if I feel as if I'm not enough, I'm going to overspend because I want to compensate for something that I feel like I don't have. I want to show people that I'm worth something. I want to show people that I have something of value because I don't actually value myself. So it directly impacts how we manage our money, going straight into debt, not being able to save our money, all of that. And I also want to kind of go into, when you think about self-love is directly tied to discipline. And so if I love myself, I'm going to discipline myself to stay away from anything that's going to harm me, right? Like I'm not going to eat bad food. I'm not going to go somewhere that's going to cause me harm if I love myself. And it takes discipline in order to stick to that. And so finances is directly, or good financial management is directly connected to discipline. So if I don't have self-love, then I'm not going to have the discipline towards myself to put myself in a good financial situation, which is going to directly impact my finances. And in addition to that, I also think about the reverse. Trauma directly affects finances, but finances directly affect trauma. You know what I mean? So if a mother or a father aren't able to provide for their children, it causes problems in the home. It causes divorce, which could cause trauma. That's one of the number one causes of divorce is financial issues within the marriage.
Right.
And so because of these things, they result in childhood trauma. Wherever you see heightened unemployment, you see crime, causes trauma in our communities. So it's all really a cycle, that we really have to think about,
Yes, ma'am.
Sir.
Beautiful.
You brought up so many keys to the many locks that we have in our community and people have around the world. A lot of this starts with education, because I would imagine that a lot of us, either ourselves or know someone that has experienced some level of trauma or discomfort just talking about family finances. Because why? A lot of times when we don't understand something, and I'm coming from as an engineer, being in certain classes and everything, I can remember myself sitting, sometimes having a couple mental breakdowns. I couldn't get through a math problem. Or I'm like, why? The answer is pi over 8. I keep getting 0. How? And that causes some level of trauma internally. You know what I'm saying? And we think about financial, a lot of our people, we didn't learn about credit growing up. You know what I'm saying? We think about the history of, how banks and things treated our people. So there's a bit of an aversion when it comes to financial literacy, right? So I want to go to Brother Gabe. And before I do that, one last thing. So sis, you spit some bars for us earlier today. And it's something I want to highlight just right out of what you said. You said, I have a spending fetish, but after I invest. That was so crazy to me, because you're talking about, and what you just said, not only in investing in the financial system, but investing in oneself. I don't eat. Do I eat what's good for me? Or I keep myself away from people who may have low vibrational energy. So to invest in oneself first, so that we not only are the best selves, but we give a best self to someone else, I think is so key. So that bar really stood out to me and everything. But I want to segue to Brother Gabe, because I see those wheels turning, good brother. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, it's interesting because we know that there's a real term called retail therapy, right?
Right.
retail therapy is a real thing.
Right.
We get that urge to splurge. We want to go to so and so shop and get a lot of Sister Zuna's latest materials right at the Peace Park, right?
Right.
And so those are the things that we kind of have. But one thing I wanted to add on to say is that our trauma has affected our finances in so many different ways, but also to the point that, the trust piece can't be denied. Like we didn't really build on that because it's really one of the main reasons why we talk about knowledge of self. Because we talk about knowledge of self. Knowledge of self doesn't only mean self as in the person, it's the collective, right? Knowledge of ourself, knowledge of our nation, knowledge of our community, knowledge of the global Black world. So knowledge of self is a deeper criterion. And so if you begin to have distrust with self, all of a sudden now you become the enemy, even though really you're an enemy in your own mind. And that's the trauma way that we're thinking about as far as black psychology is concerned, right? The fact that, our gun violence in the community is based on the fact that I don't see you as God. I don't see you as a king. I see you as the devil, which has been crazy how they switched that up around.
Right.
And so now, because I see you as the devil, I see you as the enemy, you're worthless to me, so I don't mind taking you out. And that's why this question of trust gets crazy, but it's tied specifically to financial management because we're living in poverty. For the past 5 years, what have we been hearing on the news here in Philadelphia? We've been hearing that Philadelphia is the largest and number one of all the large cities in the country of poverty. We're number one in poverty of all the major cities in the country. But we keep hearing that, but there's no remedy.
Come on.
No remedy. There's no redress. There's no plan. There's no action. We just keep putting it and hearing it in the news on 3/6/10/29 and Tribune. So we found ourselves in a situation. We said, okay, well, if we're the poorest, we're in poverty. How do I figure out a way to support myself and my family? Okay, well, I've already been undereducated and uneducated. I've been underemployed. I've been trying to provide for my family because they have the poorest healthcare. I'm gonna have to do this over here. And so it's a cycle that presents itself. And so the way that poverty has been weaponized, and the way trauma, frankly, has been weaponized, is something that we all got to fight against and understand ways that we got to get through it, which is why I'm glad that we're going to later on about how we better cope with this question as well.
Right. Wow. We're coming straight to Brother Lamont and Sister Zuna. Brother Lamont, I want you to tap in very quickly on something specific that Brother Gabe said. And I've had this conversation with people, Black, brown, and different. The concept of do for self. A lot of times we take it very literally. And because we've grown kind of hard-hearted as individuals in the Black community, we don't extend beyond the physical self when it comes for doing for self. Yeah, I'm going to get mine. And then this leads to what we call hustle mentality, but never true business. So I wanted you to, if you can unpack and kind of expand a bit upon the concept of do for self, meaning more than just I'm going to do for Lamont, but I'm going to do for myself, family, and nation.
Well, I think, Brother Jabril, I have to go back to what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He said, brother, just don't think for you and your family, think for the whole.
Yes, sir.
So, but the first law of nature is self-preservation. I can't help you as my brother or help you as my sister if I'm in a position where I can't help myself. So I just wanted to read something because there's this psychologist in New Haven, Connecticut, that came up with this term called urban trauma. And urban trauma means struggling with the lack of food or insecure housing. So how many of us have suffered urban trauma or witnessing or being a victim of violence? So when you say do for self, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan have taught us that self-improvement is the basis of community development, meaning that if each individual in the community does not get better, the community will never flourish. So doing for self starts out individually, but at some point it must transform to a collective.
That's right.
Do for self individually, but collectively, from a national standpoint, from an international standpoint, how can we pool our resources? And resources don't necessarily mean money. Resources with our intellect, networking, using the system of bartering. If I don't have money, then I may have a good or service that you may can use
that, okay, I need something from you as far as engineering. I got a background in accounting. Maybe I'll do your taxes. You do something for me from an engineering standpoint, and we exchange goods and services to help build our community. So yes, do for self, but we got to empower ourselves to help us branch out to empower others.
Go ahead,
Wow.
bro. Go ahead.
Wow, yeah.
Bro.
Sister Zuna, I'm coming right to you. Family, we are, I don't know, if y'all are not engaged or learning anything from this or just being empowered to do what you're already doing. See, we got to understand this. So a lot of us think that, oh, well, this isn't happening. Why don't you be the first one to start it? Or it is happening, but you just don't know. Or unwilling to support this person because, oh, they're too pricey, it costs too much, or I'm just too lazy in my research, right? You know, you know, there was a sister that spoke out of Mos Mariam one time, and I think she's at the head of the blackmall.com or something, and she said something very profound. She said that she didn't believe that we as a people were so much disunited as we're disconnected. A lot of us just don't know what the heck is going on with each of us. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. You might do credit or taxes, and I just don't know. And I think we have to really start and go back and get to that self-love concept, because sometimes we have these things, but because it's not the norm, or we deep down don't think we're enough or up to par, we won't support. And this is or a number of other things as well. But I want to get back to this trauma aspect, because we're really unpacking this and we're getting to, I'm hearing some solutions and everything. So Sister Camille, if you would do us the pleasure of going into this next question. So we have, are our methods to cope with trauma more damaging than the trauma we endured or continue to endure?
Okay. That question is definitely levels, right? To that question, I believe, because my simple answer is no. I'm gonna have to say my simple answer is no, because we have to think about the root to the issues, right? Something that makes people uncomfortable is taking things way, way back so that we can really destroy what's at the root of the situation, right? So we're enduring in the modern day, because we like to have a lot of conversation around, you know, historically, how they want to tell us that we came from slavery, that's our beginning as a people, especially here in America, right? But really, truly, the trauma is us being disconnected from our motherland, period, right? So we're not even addressing really that that is a historical fact. They never want to address that part, right? To bring it to modern day, the things that we endure right now, to be going through situations like poverty, and just as Brother Gabe brought up, us all living in a city that they say has the lowest amount of poverty, has the largest amount of poverty, I meant to say. So to be in a situation like that, be bearing witness to modern day oppression, right? That is the trauma that we are enduring right now. So people who did not live in slavery, because we didn't actually live through slavery, but right now we are living in slavery through modern day oppression, through the way that they set things up, so that we are falling into these systems where we're continuing generations of poverty, right? Where they have an education system that's barely teaching our children. So what do they come out to be able to do? How do they gain generational wealth, right? So to be in a place where that's what's the underlying situation, and the way that we are showing forward to cope with that would be things like different numbing agents, where we drink, you know, to numb our pain, where we get high on whatever drugs, where we give our bodies to people that we should not, because we want to just do something so that we're not thinking about what's going on, right? Where we induce amnesia in a way, because it's so much weight on our psyche with the things that we have to deal with, that we want to just forget it. We want to do anything we could possibly do to forget it. When this pandemic hit, there were a lot of conversations about how people have to slow down now, right? Do you think that people really took the time to look at themselves and address what they have going on within them to maybe come up with solutions for how they can move forward in a healthy way, right? That was the time to do that, because we're constantly busy. It's constant noise. We right now live in a big city. You know, I'm not sure what people face living out in the countryside. Probably that quiet, because we're not used to being quiet either, right? And having to really be with self. So things like that, I feel like we grow up being guarded. We grow up being guarded. That's a coping mechanism where we put walls up so that we don't really get to trust anybody else, where we don't properly learn how to trust other people, where we don't have communication. That's something that should be taught in our education system.
Right.
Proper communication, so that we can learn how to build true relationships with one another.
Right.
Why would they want to teach us that? You know, so and even Brother Gabe brought up about trust in self. When we talk about knowledge of self, when you're missing your true history as a people, as a community, like what do you connect to? When you're missing that, then I feel like you probably have a hard time even trusting yourself in some situations.
You do.
So we're looking for ways to cope, but we're looking for ways to cope that's you know, our coping is superficial when we really need to address the root, is what I'm getting at.
Praise for a lot. I gotta say something quick. It's funny, Dante, I was going right to you afterwards. Very quickly. Let me make sure I don't lose my train of thought. You know, what we've been really talking about, you know, we talked a lot about at least trauma, the pessimist, right? But I think what we're also talking about, you mentioned what's happening right now. We're experiencing a pandemic, right? So you have trauma, right? The pessimist, but you also have trauma, the catalyst. And I think that what some have experienced recently, and what we've seen through social media, maybe family and friends, is trauma, the catalyst, and how it has pushed some of us to look at self. And when I say self right now, I mean the personal self. What, you know what? I've experienced some food insecurity, some job insecurity. You know what I'm saying? How am I going to feed myself and my family? You know what? They just laid me off like that. You know what? I'm going to start writing that book I always wanted to write. Or I'm going to start really eating better. You know, now everybody's steaming and eating sea moss and bladderwhack and the navy bean and all these things, right? So now, again, the catalyst to the reaction that is trauma has made us to see ourselves. You know what? I'm not as bad as I thought I was. If I just take a little bit of time for a little bit of self-care and one day at a time. I'm talking to Brother Jabril right now because it's honest. I'm thankful to y'all because the last 2 times I've been able to look at self, you know, and come through some things, right? But being able to look at self and really just push ourselves a little bit further than we were the day before. I think it's been a blessing. And we can look at trauma as a beautiful thing. And then we're going to come to music a little bit later. I know a lot of us got something to speak on about that. But Brother Dante, right back to you, bro.
Yes, sir. Tying it back into that financial aspect, you know, it's interesting when you go through college or school or whatever, and they're telling you like kind of like the things like, you know, oh, you should take a year off of school when you graduate. And it's kind of like, you know, when you talk to Black students, the reality of Black students is much different than the reality of white students, right? A lot of Black students are going to school or going to get a degree because they're expecting to come out and make, you know, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, depending on, you know, what you're majoring, et cetera. And so, you know, in Black students' mind, you know, all they're thinking about is the money. Like, oh, well, dang, I can go ahead and make this amount of money a year as long as I work for, you know, this particular corporation or whatever. And, you know, they just thinking about all the things that they can do, whether it's for themselves or whether it's for the family or whatever. So, you know, and most of the Black students' minds is not really like it's still kind of like a survival type mechanism. Even though you're going through, you know, school to get the degree, you're still in that survival mode because you're thinking, oh, this is my way to more money. This is my way to a better quality of life. But even when you get there, you see what I'm saying? You're still having, you know, family problems. You're still having, you know, taking care of yourself. How are you trying to, or how are you trying to overcome some things from your childhood, et cetera. So you're still kind of going through this whole thing of trying to figure out life, but you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to have more money, so therefore my life is going to be better, which isn't necessarily true. And the reason why I bring that up is because, you know, when I look at white students and how white students go throughout their school, and you know, the kind of advice that white students get is like, okay, well, stay at your parents' house for 2 or 3 years so that you can save up money, so you can,
Right.
you know, go ahead and pay off your student loans, or, you know, this, that, and the third. And recently I started to ask myself, well, why are they giving that advice? Like, what benefits does it have? And as I kind of begin, as we all are kind of like saying, as I begin to kind of look at myself and look at what I've been able to do, and look at my ability to reflect on myself, a lot of that comes from financial security. You can't really sit down. You can't really sit down and reflect on your life if you got to constantly get up to work every day. If you're spending 10 to 12 hours every single day at work to provide for yourself and for your family, what time do you have to sit back and think? What time do you have to sit back and say, well, you know what do I want for my life in the next 5 years? What do I want for my life in the next 10 years? And to be honest, it really takes about a good 6 months to a year to really develop a really solid idea of the trajectory for your life. You know, and it really does take that long. And I'm speaking from personal experience now, because now, when I'm thinking about my mindset 6 months ago versus my mindset now, and just the time that I was able to take because I had, you know, said financial security to really think about what I wanted to do for the next 10 years of my life. You know, a lot of our people we don't have that. You know, we don't have that security. We don't even have the resources to even, or we don't really have the knowledge to seek the resources to even think about what I want to do with my life in the next 5 to 10 years. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, that whole taking time out and that whole really taking time to reflect, man. I mean, it's powerful, because like you said, Brother Jabril, when we seen what happened with COVID, it really made everybody slow down. It really made people know, stay in your house for a couple months. The minister said, go into your chambers and repent. Go into your chambers and reflect and think about your life. Think about what you've done. Think about what you've been through and make a change. And, you know, when we really see that 2020 has been a heck of a year, man. But to be honest, I think going forward, a lot of us are going to see 2020 as a blessing in disguise, because what it has allowed us to do, it allowed us to really look at self. It has allowed us to really look and see what gifts that, you know, we have, that we've gained over the course of our experiences. It allowed us to see, what does my brother have? What does my sister have? How can I utilize this? How can I utilize that? It helps some of us start businesses. It helps other people write books. Like, you know, it's been crazy, but I think we will definitely look back and see it as a blessing in disguise. So that's just kind of the 2 cents that I wanted to add in.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, big bro. But Lamont, I want to go back to you, segueing back to that last question about the ways we cope with trauma being more, you know, dangerous or damaging to the trauma itself. And then I want to proceed with a question of my own. So, beloved, if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, like our sister Camille did.
Yes, sir, beloved brother. Well, I think, you know, I was talking to our brother Gabe, you know, the other night, and I think the way we cope with a lot of things is we've been trained to sweep it up under the rug.
Teach.
Like, you know, our sister Jasmine talked about gaslighting, where you just act like something doesn't exist, and if you bring it up, you automatically become victim, or somebody makes you believe that what you're bringing up is not a reality. So what I'm saying to you is that even with R. Kelly, for instance, a lot of us are around here upset about R. Kelly and the things that he did with these young ladies. But how many of us haven't even addressed the R. Kelly in our own family? A lot of us
Talk about it.
Our nephews have been raped. And you want to play judge, jury, and executioner on R. Kelly, but you have never approached the sick uncle in your family at the cookout. So until we stop being in denial, you know, one of the things about trauma is they say you go through 4 phases. You go through an impact phase, in which you go through shock. You go through a rescue phase, in which you come to terms with things. Then you go through an intermediate phase where you make an adjustment, and then you go through a long-term reconstruction phase where you begin to rebuild. So I think our coping skills and our coping mechanisms right at this point have been distorted because we are in denial that they exist. And we've been trained to sweep it under the rug or trained to absorb it like that's part of life. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said something to us that was so important. He said there are trials and tribulations in life that are necessary, but he said he didn't want us to experience unnecessary suffering.
Come on.
That goes on in our life. Your sister or your cousin being raped by a family member is not necessary suffering. Because we sleep on the job and not protecting our nieces and nephews, they're being manipulated by aunts and uncles right in the family. And then that trauma of it happening in our own family destroys the ability of that young man or young woman one day wanting to get married. Because once a woman is raped, the minister said it takes God to intervene in her life for her to even ever open up to another man. So I think our coping skills, we've been trained to brush it up under the rug because we've been up under a filthy, sick individual with this ideology of white supremacy. And our ancestor, Dr. Francis Cressy Wellens, said it like this: what we are witnessing is genetic annihilation. Because you and I are the dominant gene on the planet, then two things cannot occupy the same space at the same time. And because we are that dominant gene, they are moving to annihilate us physically, mentally, socially, psychologically, biochemically. We are being assaulted on all levels. So we must have a coping skill where we have what my brother Gabe always says, these safe spaces where we can have healthy dialogues to come up with tangible results that we can address, the calamities that's going on in our families and in our community. Because whatever's going on in your personal family life transmits into the community. So that's how I would respond to that, beloved brother.
Woo! Come on now.
One thing, Brother Jabril, that I wanted to add on to.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
One thing that the brother Lamont, reminded me of, and I think it's important to kind of get to some of the root of this. Back during the times of enslavement, I want to get to the politics and the psychology of so-called thick skin that we have as a community. If we experienced traumas on the plantation, what was our role or what was our action or behavior to do? We couldn't go to a therapist.
Right.
We couldn't go to a counselor. Damn it, you better get yourself back out to the field and keep working.
That's what
Come on.
Am I lying? You
Right.
better keep working. You better still be in the house or in the field.
Right.
There was no redress. There was an opportunity to figure it out, perhaps until the evening time when the hour was dark, and perhaps you got an elder, a baba, or a iya to build with in the middle of the night.
Come on.
See, so we have to develop this level of thick skin and be able to work through those challenges. It's safe psychology and psychosis when we tend to, as Black people with our children, we don't want them to get too far out. We say, come over here, stick by our side. Why? Because on the plantation, we do not want our children to get lost, to get taken, to act out, right? So we say, we keep them close. We try to make sure that their behavior, they're not acting out, because to act out is to be taken out. And so one of the things that we understand is why we see other people's children, they just walk around like it's nothing. Why? Because they think in their mind, the world is theirs anyway. We understand from a different perspective, we've been so, devastated in our mind states, we gotta close ranks all the time and get tight and figure this thing out. And so it's very powerful. But the one positive is this: because of the generational trauma that's happened, all right, over the years, and we heard it from Brother Dante and Sister Zuna, is that we've heard the trauma of our grandparents, great-grandparents, parents even, who worked for 20, 30, 40 years of traumatic experiences on the job.
Yes.
We heard those bad job stories from dad coming home, leaving at 6 a.m, coming home at 10 at night, tired as heck, got to still get up at 4 a.m. He'd have had no sleep, no rest, and he hates his job. He's been hated as a man on the job. So what do we say? The new experience says, I'm gonna become an independent entrepreneur, to your point. I'm gonna work for myself. Because see, I'm gonna reduce your ability to impact my mind state and the ways in which I want to experience this level of humanity right now through how many years I have on the planet. I'm going to live it out with the utmost joy, the utmost passion, the utmost purpose that I can. And so I'm going to do it as an individual with my own sense of where I want to go with it and where I tend to put my talents, gifts, and skills. So that's why we see that kind of increase also in the last 10 years of Black independent small businesses. It's because we don't want to work for you, we want to work for ourselves. As breaking a generational trauma piece.
Right.
Yes, sir. Right and exact. Praise be to Allah. Family, family, family. Those watching, this is part 2 of Violence Averted, Accepting a New Paradigm. Where do we go from here? Trauma, the walking time bomb. I'm hearing so many different ideas, concepts. When you really break it down, you can look at desensitization, the thick skin concept, almost like a scientific or special adaptation that we as a people have had occur to us the same way that, you know, an animal might develop, you know, gills or whatever over time to like live aquatically, correct? So,
yes, sir.
So now when we talk about genes, we go into genes, genesis, epigenetics, the concept of literal trauma being impacting your very genes and being able to pass that on child to child to child. But I have to go back to our brother Lamont, and he brought what is perhaps the ultimate, I don't want to say coping mechanism, but solution to our ills. He brought up God. Why is that important? We're taught in the Nation of Islam that thought travels at about an average rate of 24 billion miles per second. We have an audience question from our big brother David Hassan that is very poignant and important to unpack. So whether we say the Most High, God, Yah, Yahweh, Elohim, Ra, Allah, right? Most people, whether it be religious, spiritual, or even in the scientific community, believe that we live in an environment, a world, a universe that operates off of a highly intelligent power. So our brother's question is, where is God in our trauma? If we do not believe in God, what is the purpose for our pain? I'm gonna say it one more time. Where is God in our trauma? If we do not believe in God, what is the purpose for our pain? I'm gonna let this be open, let that marinate for a second.
Yeah, let it marinate.
I will speak to that first.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So for me, and I have to bring my own personal story, right? I just recently shared my personal story of, you know, going through trauma, being affected by trauma very early on. I remember seeing someone be murdered when I was 5. And so it started very early for me. And to work through things that I also incurred on the job and being in the military, right? Trying to numb those things with alcohol. I think that for me, when I was accepting what it is that I experienced and looking for a better way, that brought me to God, right? So the trauma that I experienced, I do believe the purpose was to grow me to be this person that I am right now. And I believe that I live my life every day to that point, right? Had I not went through those things, would I even believe that there is a God?
Come on.
To be in a place where you really have, you know, everything handed to you, things are all great. You know, you wake up every day and don't have to worry about having water, running water in your house, you know, having very simple things you take for granted. Would you even believe that there is a God? Someone is probably giving you your purpose, right? In that way, to say that this, as you grow, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take over this company, or, you know, I'll be able to give you this money because we already have things set up. So as I went through the trauma that I experienced in my life, I do absolutely believe that that brought me to my purpose and to God. They are one and the same for me.
God, and we're taught God is one possessing power and force. So again, breaking that down and what that really means for, again, trauma as a catalyst.
Yes.
And our ability to be powerful and forceful, right? Brother Dante broke down force, right? Or stress being a force over a certain area.
Yeah.
Power, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dante, that's work times speed, correct? Dante, you heard me?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes, so work times speed, so work times distance over time, right? Or work times distance divided by time. So we're really powerful, right? The more we can do in a short amount of time, or the more work, the farther we can go in a short amount of time. So bringing that back to God, right? The concept of trial and tribulation really makes no sense if there is no greater meaning behind it. If I am, working out and I'm experiencing, like, it hurts. I don't like doing legs personally. So every time I do legs, and I had I don't have the best knees. So when I do legs, it's kind of traumatizing, if you will. You know what I'm saying? Especially starting off. But I realized that the gains that I get physically and even emotionally afterwards, flying up and down the stairs, you know what I'm saying? Just better mobility on the basketball court, walking down the street, the just physical prowess that you have. It's worth it. Same way with going through trauma and God, to understand that there is something beyond your pain right now that you are qualifying yourself for by what you're experiencing at this very moment in time. So that was very, very powerful, Sister Zuna. Thank you so much. This is an open question, so we want to keep building on this for a little bit. Anybody else have anything to add? Go ahead, Dante.
I wanted to say something really quickly. One of the things I learned from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the power of perception and how we perceive things. And many of us go through a lot of different things in life. Some others can't even really comprehend. But just kind of throughout my life, one of the things that I really learned was that it depends on how you see it. You see what I'm saying? So we were talking earlier about, that self-worth and that self-image. And, it's hard for us to build with each other if I'm seeing you as a devil, if I'm seeing you as somebody that's evil. Well, we can apply that to self as well. If I'm looking at myself as like I'm evil, I'm worthless, I'm not this, I'm not that, then I'm going to think that all of the trials and the tribulations that I'm going through in my life don't mean anything, right? Because I'm worthless. So if I'm worthless, well, I deserve this, so I ain't nothing anyway. So this is normal. This is regular. Like, you see what I'm saying? There's nothing meaningful behind the experience that I'm going through because I'm not looking at myself as nothing. And so on my shirt here, I don't know if everybody can see it, but it has the most honorable Muhammad, and it says, whenever you're looking at a black man, you are looking at God, and that self identity, that ability to identify yourself with the creator, that ability to identify yourself with the all-powerful, that does something to your psyche. That does something to you when you're going throughout different trials in life. You say, dang, this is hard. I'm going through this is trying, but I know that I can get through it. I know that there's light at the end of darkness, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan always teaches us. Is like, so that self-worth, I think that's where the God lies, right? Where's God in our trauma? The God is in how you perceive it. Because if you're perceiving it as I'm a devil, I'm nothing, then you're not really going to try to overcome that particular trial. You're not going to try to overcome that particular experience. But if you're looking at it in a way like, wow, God put this in my life. I wonder how he did that. All right, well, you know what? I'm just going to tackle it. I'm going to try and overcome it. I'm going to do my best. And, you know, we're going to see how this thing work out. So that's really how I look at a lot of things that I currently go through now, is that, wow, this is interesting. Okay, cool. How am I going to tackle this? How am I going to do that? Because God is a scientist. God is somebody who was the master planner. You see what I'm saying? And you know, and they plan, but and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. So if he is the best of planner, and you know, the black man is God, well, dang, that means I got to be a planner too. That means that I have to be a thinker too. That means that I have to be a scientist as well. So every problem that comes up in my life, I got to figure out how to overcome it, and I got to see the benefit that's inside of it. So we have to look at ourselves better. We have to look at ourselves as more positive, because once we do that, then what's on the outside is only going to be a reflection of what's on the inside. So, and that's that God power, right? God, as you mentioned, Brother Jabril, is force and power. So if he's force and power, and that means that I can literally control the events in my environment. So if I have that idea of myself, if I can see that, wow, I can control what's going on around me, all I have to do is have the proper knowledge, and then have the will to change what is happening inside of my life, then there's nothing that I can't accomplish.
Oh, study got alert. Study got alert.
Powerful.
Yes,
I want to add on to the brother. Hey, Dante, man. Hey, Dante, brother.
Jasmine. Go ahead.
The brother Dante is getting me charged up, family. I'm trying to tell you. Yes, sir. I'm thinking about the psychology, as far as trauma is concerned, of low expectations. Particularly because what happens is with trauma is, you know, there's a reason why we say that, you know, cleanliness is close to what? Godliness. Because we know what clutter does. See, clutter is actually a manifestation of what's going on up here. You know, you see a lot of clutter. You got things going here, this way, that way, and we will avoid it, even though it's right in front of our faces.
Come on.
We walk around it, we'll walk on top of it, we'll walk behind it, we'll act like it's not even there. But it is there, and somebody will go to your house and say, what in the world is going on? Right. You had no clue that there's so much clutter in your space. And so it becomes to normalize it, right? This question on low expectations. That also seeps into the ways that we look at our community, right? So we don't mind the potholes in the street, the trash in the street. We don't mind homes not being fixed up. It's not about wanting to do it or not. It's about thinking to ourselves, I don't deserve better. You see what I'm saying? And that's the way how it gets weaponized. Poverty and trauma gets weaponized to say, we know that those folks over there, that community, don't care about the problem. Well, really, some don't care, but most don't understand that they actually have a God level of intellect and a God level of spirit that they can tap into. They just haven't yet. And so we got to be able to build on those discussions. But also back to your point, Brother Jabril, about godliness, you know, how we tap into God. There are 3 experiences where most people find themselves getting closer to God in their life. The first experience is the experience of incarceration. Right? You're here for 5-10 years, you experience the traumas of what you did or what somebody did to you, and you come out, or while you're in there, you get closer to the Bible, the Quran, otherwise, right? While you're inside, you come out perhaps a different person. Second being recovery, those dealing with substance abuse, substance misuse, right? You find yourself in a pattern, you're doing a 12-step program, doing another type of program of recovery, and you understand that at your lowest self, and you're at the bottom of the bottom, just you alone by yourself. For many of us going through recovery, it was only yourself and God. See, because the parent couldn't help you through that. Your brother couldn't help you through that. The imam couldn't help you through that in some cases, right? But you and a creator, right? A high spirit was able to nurture in you the strength and motivation and momentum to keep pushing forward towards the level of recovery, to leave off whatever you were addicted to. And the third being what? The hospital. Which goes back again to the question of how trauma is not only mental, but in effect affects our physical body, right? There are those of us actually who are sick right now in hospitals right now, where their sickness was precipitated by a actual mental situation. It might have been diet perhaps, but it also could have been your thoughts. And we know that thoughts are things. So those are some of the things we got to be dealing with about how we figure out how we can tap into the God nature of ourselves through those three experiences, that we know that at the highest level of trauma, we can look at those three areas as examples, be it hospitals, again, incarceration or recovery, as just three examples.
Yes, sir. Wow, wow. Family, I'm having a good time. I'm learning a lot. I'm being reaffirmed in a lot. We've definitely done a great job, I think, unpacking trauma and its effects. And I think we've organically segued into being solution-oriented. And I think we know the umbrella, really, for the solutions is tapping into the God within. We just talked about how there are three core instances when we're at the lowest of our low, where we tap into that God within and begin to really just change and chart a new course for the rest of our lives. Hopefully, or inshallah, impacting not only ourselves, but our family, friends, others. Like, you don't do this no more, bro. Like, bro, you don't nah, man, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? You don't eat meat no more? Nah, man, I'm good. You don't want to hang out? No, I'm just, how about you come and, be my guest at Muhammad Mosque number 12, or whatever it is, whatever you have found, whatever book, guru, course you found that has made you who you are. People see that, and now you have a different magnetic pull about you, and you attract a new circle. So I want to ask Sister Jasmine a quick question, something I was thinking about. The Honorable Minister of Farrakhan has talked to us about purpose and how the human being, I think he was talking particularly about men, but in general, the human being is at his happiest when he or she is working within their purpose. I'm paraphrasing. And doing and being productive at that. So Sister Jasmine, do you feel that upon finding one's purpose, that trauma ends? If so, why? But if not, why? And is that a bad thing?
It's a good question. I don't feel as if, in short, to answer your question, no, that trauma is going to end once you find your purpose. But in a sense, once you find your purpose, it helps you better to channel the trauma that you've been through for better, if that makes sense. So because of the fact that I know my purpose and I know what I'm supposed to do in this life and how I'm supposed to impact others, it further not only motivates me to, but helps me to better tap into what I've been through, so then I can use it in order to complete my purpose, in order to fulfill my purpose, to answer your question. Yes, sir.
That's great. So I guess it almost like going back to the, what's the meaning behind the trauma? It's like, okay, upon finding purpose, now it's like, okay, I understand why I'm experiencing what I've been experiencing, either self-imposed or externally. Thank y'all so much. We want to give a couple shout outs. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Well, just one more thing to add. And just thinking about the purpose of pain and the purpose of trauma, I know, we all have different belief systems.
Right.
For me, it makes me think about when I first came to the Nation of Islam, or really was introduced to the teachings, it really gave me a different perception of God. And when I say that, I mean, when you think about, just the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and going into the theology of time, this concept of God or Allah being in triple darkness and creating himself and coming out of that and going at war with darkness and it being struggle. And that was something that was interesting to me when I first heard that. I was like, what? He went at war with darkness. It was struggle. It was, and if we're taught we're created in his image and in his likeness, in order to become a God or find God within ourselves, we have to understand its process. It's not just like light switch, like, okay, boom, I'm a God now. You know what I mean? Like there's process in it. Even thinking about, giving birth and the womb and the pain that, comes from that in order to give life. Everything is process. So when you think about how struggle is ingrained in everything that we really see in nature in order to create the beauty that we see, It's like, how can we separate ourselves from that? That makes sense.
So, you talked about a process.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think when we look at, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked to us about, when you think or you feel you have the right way, you should be able to speak, at least in some way, shape, or form, to, the other ways or ideologies people have. And that if your religion or whatever isn't firmly rooted in, I believe it's mathematics, nature, science, and in the scriptures, then it can't be necessarily made to be fact. So you were talking about a process, and when we look at nature, everything abides by that. Whether it's the caterpillar going into the butterfly, there's some process that's usually not necessarily a quick process to get from point A to point B. I think if anyone's familiar with comedic science, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's taught that there's 42 years to godhood. Is that correct?
40 years, yes, sir. 40
years. So
yes,
when we think about that concept, that's another process, right? So when we going back to the financial thing, when people bring to you, quote unquote, get rich quick schemes, some of the richest in history were kings and queens. So to be rich can't be quick. And it is a process by which you inherit things and are able to develop oneself higher. I would be remiss, family. We have some really engaged audience members. I want to give a special shout out to my big bro, Brother Wayne X Chang. Also want to give a huge shout out to our sister and auntie, Sister Khadija El Amin. I want to give another shout out to my brother Enrico X and big bro Chris Muhammad. We have some other questions as well, family. Thank you so much. So for my sister Khadija, we started unpacking this a bit, but she asked, do we all agree that the internal thought process of self affects how trauma is processed or caters to us eventually overcoming it? I'm gonna ask that one more time. Do we all agree that the internal thought process of self affects how trauma is processed or caters to us eventually overcoming it? That's an open question as we continue.
I think I'll just touch on it quickly. Yes. Going back to that whole distressing thing, right? Distress is a negative force, which means that it's negative can go either way. But when something is negative, right? It's like love and hate. They're really the same emotion, but love is in the positive direction and hate is just in the negative direction. Well, it's the same thing with this trauma and these distressing experiences. These are negative experiences coming to you, but you have the power to take that force, to take that experience, process it, and turn it into a positive force or a positive push to push you in a positive direction. So yes, that's why I said the perception thing, that's really, really important, because if you have the proper perception of things, even though you may have seen it initially as a negative experience, as you begin to go through that experience, and as you begin to process that experience, I think that a lot of us begin to see like, oh wow, maybe this wasn't as negative as I thought, or maybe maybe this wasn't as hindering to me as I thought, because all I had to do was really look at it proper. Going back to what I mentioned about COVID, you see what I'm saying? At first, we're like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like, what's going on? You see what I'm saying? Because our perception of it wasn't necessarily proper. And I have to thank God for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, because he really puts things into its proper place, and he really puts things into the proper perspective. So, so many people was waiting for that July 4th address, because they're like, Minister, how are we supposed to see this? Like, what's going on? What is the direction? How are we supposed to interpret this?
Am I on the right track at least? Like, I
exactly.
feel like I kind of understand,
What really did it for me, to be honest, was really Ramadan. Those who are tuning in aren't familiar with Ramadan it's a 30-day fast where we don't eat or drink anything in the daytime, and we break our fast at night, and we read the entire Quran in 30 days. Is broken up into 30 parts. So that's what did it for me. when the minister came on I think it was like the last couple of days, and he spoke on the Ramadan prayer line. And like I said, he just has a way of putting things, and it has a really way of just changing how you look at a lot of things, globally, nationally, even personally. And yeah, I feel like once you begin to process those initial negative experiences, I think we really begin to see how positive and how beautiful they are, and we're able to speak to what that experience has done for us personally in our life.
Wow, yes, sir. Praise be to Allah. Anybody else before we proceed to what may be one of my favorite questions, actually?
Can you repeat the question again?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know that was a longer one. So, give me a quick second. So, coming again from our sister Khadija El Amin, she said, "Do we all agree that the internal thought process of self, how we view self, affects how trauma is processed?" They said, or caters to us eventually overcoming it. So basically, our thought process, it can either, it has an effect on, how we process trauma. It can also have an effect on our ability to overcome it. Do we agree with that?
Well, I would say yes. And one of the things that Brother Dante, I think, brought up that was very key was Dante talked about perception. And a lot of times, perception is not reality.
More.
We make our perception our reality. I say this to say it almost correlates to where's God in the trauma. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about in the womb, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan told us that when our mothers and fathers had conjugal relations, there were millions and billions of sperm cells emitted into a hostile environment called the womb. That sperm had intelligence, but that sperm had to overcome the trauma in the womb to meet with the egg. And once that sperm met with the egg, it found a firm resting place, but all those other sperm became food. So they died off. So what God was showing us, even in the womb, that in order for us to be able to overcome the vicissitudes of life, you and I have to be a warrior. We had to be a warrior, and it's proven that we're a warrior because the fact that we're sitting on this Zoom, meaning that we are the sperm that made it out of the billion sperm cells that was emitted on that act of procreation. So what am I saying? That there has to be dialectics. You got God and devil, right? You got heaven and hell. You got trials and blessings. So you hear people say, turn your tragedy into a triumph. So trials, God is the facilitator in whatever trauma we're going to, if we have the proper perception of why God is allowing that in our life. And I think what Minister Farrakhan teaches us is that God has an active will and he has a permissive will. Meaning that there's certain things in our life that God actively causes to happen, and then there's certain things in our life that happen that God permits to happen, that if you and I live long enough, we will see the purpose of why God allowed that to happen in our life. Just like he may allow us to go through a bad relationship to prepare us for that proper queen or king that may come down the line, and we will appreciate that king or queen based on that bad experience that we may have had 5 or 6 years ago. So God is always present in the trauma. We just got to perceive it in the right manner.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Praise be to Allah.
Can I add one thing?
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add one thing before you, just in kind of merging everything that we're talking about, and to kind of go off of what Brother Dante was saying about perception. When we talk about thought process and trauma, I think it's really important to watch how we think about our role in our own trauma. So in a sense of, if we are victims of violence, if we're victims of rape or sexual abuse, understanding that these things weren't our fault. Brother Lamont had brought up R. Kelly. It made me think of Precious. And in the movie in Precious, she was sexually abused. And I don't recall if it was her father, her stepfather, or her mother's brother. boyfriend. But her mother basically blamed her, and basically, you know, calling her out of her name and saying, okay, you trying to come at my man and everything. And she's a child, you know what I mean? And she went through this sexual abuse. And so at that age, she's being taught to think, okay, what I went through is because of me. And that's not the case. And when we think about, I just think our thinking and trauma processing first, our role in it, and that what we went through, and maybe sometimes we go through trauma and it is our fault or is a result of our actions, but really thinking about what role we played in our trauma and processing that in a healthy way and really understanding that, I think is important.
So great. That was a great point. I think that, you know, the victimhood or the concept of, you know, the victim putting more and more on him or herself, or, you know, thinking that it's their fault, definitely plays a big role into how we internalize trauma and how we're able to move forward from it if it just becomes a part of us in a negative or a positive light. You know, I want to segue to one of our last questions put before us before we started. You know, we are taught in the Nation of Islam, excuse me if I'm paraphrasing, that, you know, some of us at the highest, you know, I guess frequency for conversation is about when you talk about God. So when we want to be in that same line of thinking, we talk about vibrations, frequency, when we ask this question. So what role does music play in reducing the tension of trauma in children or young adults? What role does music play in reducing the tension of trauma in children or young adults? And it could be anyone for that matter. You know, if it's for those seasoned individuals, they may not consider themselves in that category.
Well, I'll start on that question. One thing that actually makes me think of is when I think about music, particularly in the Black community, a lot of the times we haven't really seen ourselves represented in the media. And so I feel as if music was always kind of that medium or channel for us to see ourselves, and to see ourselves doing positive things. And so music in general, even though it can have a negative effect as well, because there's a lot of misrepresentation or negative representation of us within music, it still allows us in order to see ourselves, which in turn helps with our self-worth, our self-love, and our self-knowledge. And then also in general, just when we think about music, I mean, it's something that's so constructive and really taps into our intelligence. Like when I was all throughout middle school, I played the flute, for instance. I was in like a band. And when you think about learning music, learning how to read music, learning how to play instruments, how it really just taps into our intelligence, taps into us being disciplined. It's something constructive that a lot of us have found in order to take us away or distract or replace a lot of what we've gone through, if that makes sense. So it's just something that's been really positive, you know, for me in my life, and I know for a lot of others.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Anyone else? This is an open question, and I know this is a question, even though I'm not a panelist and I'm directing the conversation, this means a lot to me because it definitely has been a great manifestation in my own life as it pertains to how I articulate, you know, myself. So, anybody, music, its positive effect on us as it pertains to trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add on and say, you know, going back and then coming forward, we found ourselves in enslavement. You know, not only did they take our name, not only did they take our spirit, not only did they take our mind, but they took our drum. There's a meaning and a reason why they took that drum. They understood what we understood, which is that the drum found a way to tap into a certain frequency and a certain wavelength that was very much a part of our core code that connected us to the cosmos, frankly.
Right.
That connection of the drum to our ancestors that was used in tradition and ritual was very much a part of our everyday. We woke up to the drum. We had meals to the drum, and we
Come
went
on.
to bed to the drum. And so when you first take it, and then now in latter day formation, not only do you take it, but you distort it, you restructure it,
Come on.
you put some devilishment on top of it. Now all of a sudden we find ourselves in a situation where the drum that was so sacred for us has been now used against us. And so that's the deep thing about this. But in many ways, I always make this point. You know, music, as we know, plays a central part to our very activity today. If we want to study on the job or at home, we play a certain kind of music.
Come on.
If we're at work and we want a certain kind of music to get through that, report or that, final project, we play a certain kind of music. When you go into the gym first thing in the morning at 6 a.m., you're in the gym, you're trying to lift so-and-so, or, Brother Jabril trying to get his legs in, he's playing a certain kind of music. And
That's right.
when your children are getting ready to go to sleep, you're playing a certain kind of music. Why is it? Because music, we understand, it codes into our mindset, our brain, it secures certain frequencies, attachment to high levels of peace in order to function whatever operations we want to tap into. So whether that's working out, whether that's running, whether that's sleeping, whether that's writing, whether that's, dancing, whether that's celebration, it's powerful. And so again, once again, and I think Dr. Wesley Muhammad has been heavy on this the past couple of years, it can be weaponized and used against us if we're not careful. And so
Right.
one of our jobs has to be to take the drum back, and take it back in a way that lets us understand as a people and as a community what that drum has historically always meant to us, but also what it can mean even in a current context. The drum doesn't always even have to always mean music. The drum could also mean the heartbeat. What's the first thing they do when a child is born? They want to put that baby right on your chest and skin to skin, feel that heartbeat and feel that energy. That's also a drum. That's also a vibration that we want to tap into. And so that energy, that force is really something that we want to take hold of, be spiritually minded about, and also share with our children so they can understand what's the BS, frankly, but also what can enlighten them and nurture them in their spirit.
Yes, sir. If I may add, you basically started talking about the drum and its many uses. And I think understanding music and cadence and its meaning, you can go from the drum as a means of, enjoyment, communication. And the drum also has a military aspect of it too. When you come and you march in and you close ranks, you play a drum to let people know that you're on your way in.
Yes,
and
sir.
It changes the mind of your enemy to let them know that not only are they coming, but they're coming in a unified manner. And if we relate that to our community and we march to the same drum beat, right? That is to do unto others and we would have done unto us, to extend do for self beyond Jabril to Sister Zuna, Brother Dante, Brother Lamont, Sister Jasmine, Brother Gabriel. See, everything, every law has both the physical and metaphysical, if you will, duality to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like the drum, it's so many uses. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Yes,
another thing, just really quickly for me, as I segue to another panelist, music has a special place in my heart. As I've danced competitively and recreationally since I was about 13. So training different urban styles, whether it be, ballroom, breakdancing, popping, different street styles and everything. So I've been a big proponent of presenting a very visual representation of music. So I knew when I was in school, a big thing for me coming up, not only popping, I was big into crunk and the emotive aspect of if I was going through something, or I could really make people to feel me here because of what I was doing, whether I was beating my chest, jumping, doing a large circle or anything, you could really paint the texture of the music very visually, and the impact it had on myself and things I couldn't necessarily articulate of how I was feeling. You knew, or I could get off my chest because of that visual representation of music. And also not only just understanding music on a deeper level, because you ever see a piece of choreography and like, dang, where did they hear that in the song? I didn't see that. I listened to this one song so many times, but now it's been taken in so many different ways where I can hear it better now because of someone's interpretive dance to that. So I know for me, when it came to trauma, just being able to say things that I couldn't say in another way, and also exercise different muscles to be able to get to a heightened level of awareness of myself as well, definitely for me. But I definitely want to segue. Anybody else have anything on this great portion? Yes, Sister Jen.
Okay, I just wanted to one more thing that I just wanted to add about music, but in particular writing and music. One thing that I found, particularly with stress and anxiety, writing is so powerful because when you have thoughts going in your head at 100 miles an hour, and it's hard to process everything, putting something on paper gives you peace and gives you ease because it's a sense of release, right? And so I've always felt personally for me that putting my thoughts, putting my emotions and my experiences to paper, I'm able to tell my story. And I feel like that's something that has always been what hip hop is, us telling our stories. And even though, now today, a lot of what we see in hip hop with violence in the streets being glorified, over sexualization of women being glorified, when we think about how it started out and still talking about the same subjects about the streets, about our women, it really was just us reflecting our experiences and what we were going through. And it gave us really a voice and a collective voice for us to really talk to each other and be able to hear each other. So for that has always been so powerful, I think, to us as a people and in particular to me. So.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
I can say something else for two real quick, man, about that last point, because they raised, man, Sister Jasmine dropped some knowledge on that point, because I'm thinking back to the South Bronx, 1973. What was going on in South Bronx in 1973? We had houselessness, homelessness, we had rampant violence, we had rampant oppression, we had rampant trauma, right? We had rampant folks who, couldn't get jobs. We had folks who couldn't get, employment, couldn't make it through day by day. We had brothers and sisters who had just came back from the war, right? The war in Vietnam. People who were dealing with the trauma of war overseas. People who are still dealing with the remnants of, overt white supremacy in the name of, the state and the government coming up against them, the police. We still dealing with the Panthers, fighting on, trying to figure out things for our communities. And so we're dealing with all these mind states. And it was so heavy on us, right? Until one day, somebody said, let's do this. You see what I'm saying? Just a beat,
Yes, sir.
a beat got people together. And we understood that, okay, we're all traumatized. We're all dealing with the same issues. We're all dealing with the same levels of oppression right now as a community, right? But all of a sudden, people heard out there project buildings. Oh shoot, that beat is crazy though. He plugged something up into the light post. We could dance to it just for a couple hours.
Right.
For a couple hours, we can have a couple hours of liberation, a couple hours of freedom to escape the madness and the turmoil that existed in the other 22 hours of our day. If just those 2 hours could fill us with a sense of hope, a sense of love, a sense of peace once again, then that's how hip hop starts. That's how that beat starts. That's how that rhythm starts. And so for me, I'm thinking about hip hop again. History is so important in this moment because that drum board is outside. That drum board is outside to that love. That drum board is outside here in Philadelphia to Parkside, right? To parties out on Parkside Avenue, parties on Jefferson Avenue, parties down Southwest during the same period of time. And so it's very, very important to talk about that and how music was actually utilized as a ways to reduce our everyday traumas, what we had been experiencing, that's actually why it became more than a genre. See, we don't say jazz is a culture.
Right.
See, we don't say rock and roll is a culture. We say hip hop is a culture. Why do we do that? Because hip hop became more than just what we're listening to. It became the ways in which we live, the ways in which we showed up in the world, the ways in which we, behaved ourselves. Right? Hip hop is a culture because it tapped into the Black experience of us here in the hills of North America, but specifically tapped into what are we dealing with to get out of it. It really was a form of resistance to the madness. And so that's why I really want to think about how we can resist trauma, not only today, but going forward. The most important day for me of tonight's event is tomorrow, because I would hope that everything that we've been heard today and educated on, we can implement starting tomorrow morning.
And on that point, again, thought is traveling so fast. I want to segue and be very distinct and unpack some solutions. Like brother said, the most important thing about tonight is tomorrow. Because out of everything we said, if we do not try to implement, discuss, unpack, and work on at least one of the things ourselves as a collective and share it with someone else, then we really are just talking. And we want the duty of the civilized man is to teach and train the uncivilized. Not that you're necessarily walking around here, no clothes on, being savage, but your level of civilization is really represented by how you conduct your life. So if we're not improving in that way, shape, or form, then we're really not growing and moving forward. So there's an old adage, right, or maybe more current, always forward, never backward. But we have to understand what happened, before us to move forward. Going back to that concept of Sankofa. So what I want for all of us to do, I need one distinct solution based on what we talked about tonight, whether it be individually, as a family, as a community, from each of the panelists. And within that one solution, how have you as an individual played a part in advancing that solution? So I'm gonna say it one more time. One distinct solution for each of us. It could be on any level, whether as an individual, family, community, greater Black community, and how you as an individual have been instrumental in at least starting to be a part of that solution that you put forth.
I guess I'll start.
You go ahead. Whoever wants to go first, and then we'll just go down from there.
Yeah. So for me, something that I've started doing, or I guess something that I've kind of like been developing, is that as a STEM major or someone that has studied like STEM sciences, a lot of us, even from kind of like K through middle school or high school, a lot of us have traumatic experiences when it comes to math, science, engineering, and technology. So I can't really describe how many people I've talked to that was like, oh, I don't like math because I had a bad math teacher when I was in third grade, or I don't like science because, the way my science teacher taught in fifth grade or sixth grade, they didn't teach it well, or something like that. So even when it comes to certain subjects like math and science, we even have traumatic experiences there because of how it's been taught to us. And it hasn't been, thoroughly explained. So because of these experiences when we were younger and how it's been taught, we don't even go into a lot of, Black people don't even go into STEM majors. They don't major in engineering or math or, computer science or something like that. So something that I've been working on, something that I want to do is really reintroduce STEM in a way that's, Black people friendly, if that makes sense. So and there's a way to do it. Going to a HBCU, having that image of, Black engineering teachers really helped me out a lot. we always, something that, you know, we say now is always representation matters. And that's true in a lot of different aspects. That's true in cartoons. That's true in, you know, I like anime. So that's true in anime, you know, that's true in,
and we definitely the coldest. We be the coldest character.
that's true in STEM too. You know, we need that representation so that, you know, our people are not so adverse to subjects that are really nation building subjects, right? When you go into STEM subjects, you're really learning things about the physical universe, that, you know, that are real, that you can use and that you can apply to really start building your communities and really start building your nation. So I'm developing a platform now that's aiming to do just that. So yeah, that's a project that I've been working on.
Yes, sir. We'll be looking forward to tapping in. You know, I'm gonna be looking forward to tapping in.
Yes, sir.
And everything, extending my platform as it pertains to STEM and everything. Sister Zuna, over to you, Queen.
So I would like to say, as far as a solution, I always highly encourage us to get more experience and education in communicating, because that we do not learn that in school in a very clear and concise way for us to have healthy connections and relationships. I really highly always encourage people to learn better ways to communicate. I do facilitate workshops through my business in the community, usually at the North Philly Peace Park. I facilitate workshops around communication, effective communication, like talking the way that we talk to each other, because I've been in situations, you know, where they have us do role play. You might be going to therapy and they want you to role play through something. And I'm like, this is not how we would talk to each other. So I want to bring it and make it very real, you know, and make the conversations be something that would be a real life situation so that people would be comfortable really maybe explaining to somebody like, these are my boundaries. And the way that you're coming at me about something I don't like, you know, we have to be able to communicate through hard situations. So I really highly encourage people to learn better communication skills.
All right, so we got enhanced communication skills in our community. We have a project dedicated to making STEM conducive to the Black learner. Again, that's not what it's necessarily going to be called. I'm just summarizing for all of us when we talk about these solutions and things you might want to gravitate to or do yourself, so we're clear. Brother Gabriel.
Yes, sir. I think I agree. Well, first of all, I agree with what my family said. I also say for me, you know, I keep, you know, it just works for me anyway. I keep books with me. I keep journals with me. I probably got about 10 of them sitting right here. I write a lot. I've been doing this since I was probably in middle school, and it allows me to get out my most innermost thoughts, you know, poetry to I'm angry to, you know, so if I'm on my commute to work, I mean, obviously that hasn't happened in about 6 months, but if I'm on the regional rail to work or whatever it is, I'm writing. If I'm on the L, I'm writing. If I'm on the sub, I'm writing. Because I want to be able to get some, you know, certain thoughts out. You know, it could be midnight, I'm writing because it allows me to, you know, we're only vessels for the Most High. And so oftentimes I really want to make sure that that's an obligation that I fulfill, that maybe these thoughts aren't mine all the time. And maybe it's the spirit guiding me to let certain ideas, you know, out on paper. So I write. And also I think for me, checking in on the young people in my life during this time of COVID and the pandemic and this crisis across the world, we have to really do double and triple checks on our young people who are going through a whole range and myriad of traumatic experiences, psychological trauma and challenges as they think about, wow, I haven't seen my friends in 6 months. Wow, I'm used to seeing everybody in daycare. Now I'm just seeing mom every day. You know, it's a real thing, and it's something that for them isn't a normal. And so I would just say check in, tap in, talk to, discuss with our children and young people, because they may not fully understand what all this means, but we obviously have a better grasp, but even we don't even understand what's going on. So they obviously have a different perspective. I'll close by saying this: think outside the box. Our paradigm must be shifted. You know, they used to say that we drop out of school, No, we're pushed out of school. We say, they tell us that we're driving while black. No, we didn't get arrested by driving while black. We got arrested because they're patrolling while racist. And so we want to shift the ways our paradigm, the ways that we look at the world, that will enable us to get to a better place as well.
Yes, sir. We added writing to
Yes,
the
sir.
list, and I definitely want to start doing that myself. Get some thoughts down on paper. Praise be to Allah. Sister Jasmine.
One thing that I think about as a solution, and kind of going off of what Sister Zuna was saying about how a lot of the negative ways that we cope is through numbing tactics. So we drink, we do drugs, and a lot of the time, I feel like the best thing is just to face the pain in order to process it. And so I've always tried to, it kind of hits close to home. Family members that I may know, or friends of mine, that sometimes they don't realize, that you're an alcoholic, and how much that you drink. Okay, I'll take a drink every now and then, but sometimes it becomes so frequent and you don't realize it's a function of you coping with your depression or whatever is really deep inside you. And so just being a positive light in order to help those stay sober and really be able to deal with and process their trauma. And also, give information on alternate ways in order to cope with trauma. As a vanguard in the Nation of Islam, we've given workshops, to women to give them ways in order to cope with their trauma that are alternatives to those negative effects. And it's being in the community in order to give that information, because a lot of people, they don't know how to, what mechanisms rather that they can use in order to cope with it that's other than drugs or alcohol. So that's a big solution, for me, is to be able to tackle that, like our struggles with addiction. Because once we stop numbing ourselves and kind of face what we're really going through, then we can really deal with it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Brother Lamont, as we start to close out.
Just real quick, one of the things that I've been working on is being a better and effective listener, and also being a lifelong educator, whether it's in the schools, but also being active in my community and taking on the mindset as a Black man in education, realizing that God placed me there for a reason, because there are not a lot of Black educators. Black male educators. The education field is dominated by Black women and white women. And the psychological effect on our young men when they come into a school and they're not able to identify or see a male role model plays a major role in them dropping out of school. So I know my place, and I'm staying in education for that reason, because when any young man that I'm around, I want him to see a dignified man. I want him to see a strong man. I want him to see a man that he sees as a solid object that he can identify with, that if his father is not home, he has a father figure in me. He has a counselor in me. He has somebody that can help him navigate through the pitfalls of life. And I think for me, that's very important. So I stopped asking why there aren't a lot of men in education. I know why there aren't a lot of men in education, because they don't want to wake up the young lions that are in the school to become them great kings and them great gods that they can become. So if you can continue to feed them a white supremacist education and get them involved in a multicultural education where they're confused about their gender or they're confused about their sexuality, then they'll never grow up to be the masters of the universe that the Creator designed for them to be. So I think that's my role, being an effective listener, an active educator, and then networking with my people in the community that come from all walks of life.
Praise be to Allah. Family, all those listening, this has been part 2 of Violence Subverted, Accepting a New Paradigm. Where do we go from here? Trauma, the walking time bomb. We have learned, and we can implement these things personally and start to really move to a familial and community engagement level whether it's, making STEM more conducive for Black learning, right? Becoming more well-versed in interpersonal communication, right? Writing more, our personal thoughts, getting them on paper and coming face to face with maybe in our head that may be a business idea or just be a manifestation of what we're going through so we can better tackle it later, right? Stopping the numbing of ourselves to come in contact with what it is we're going through and being able to find proper help. And lastly, being an active listener, being active in our community and taking education, putting education in the proper light, particularly as a male as it pertains to waking up the masses. So, fam, I hope we've been well fed. If there's one thing I would leave us with is, for me, I'm 26, be 27 in November. I've been married now a little over 2 years, all praise due to Allah. And one of the things that I always struggled with is my perception of dumping on my significant other or someone that's close to me as a man or someone who always felt that everyone's going through something, so why should I add to it? As men in particular, people find that confidant, learn how to be vulnerable and be open about what you struggle with. And then after that, meet it head on and take it one day at a time to be better with whatever that is. All right. And with that, family, I thank you again for joining us. I want to segue and bring our co-chairman, Brother Leroy, back on and have him close us out from this wonderful session. Brother Leroy, it's on you, good brother. You're muted. You're still muted, Brother Leroy. We can't hear you.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you for all the family.
Thank you, sir.
Real. Give yourselves a hand. I really appreciate it. I listened, and I learned. We really enjoyed tonight's session. I'd like to thank all the viewers out there that have sat and joined us tonight. And I pray that you were able to capture something out of this here. And I'm sorry for not being able to. There were quite a few people in the chat room that were responding, and we couldn't get to all the questions. But God willing, in due time, as we progress through our sessions, maybe we can address some of the questions that have come up in tonight's session here tonight. We're going to have, within the next week or two, maybe a little shorter, we're going to try to press things a little forward. So we'll be coming back. So we want everybody to keep your eyes and your ears attuned to what it is that we're doing. Brother Jabril, another excellent session. I really appreciate you. Before I close out tonight, I would like to just have all of us to give a prayer of comfort to the founder of the 10,000 Fearless, Student Minister Abdul Sharif Muhammad. His wife has passed. The janazah was held this morning. He is the primary person that came with the concept of the 10,000 Fearless, presented it to Minister Farrakhan, and was given the go forth to do so. And that sister was very dedicated. She did a lot of great work, and she's going to be missed. She was well loved, and she's going to be missed, Sister Sharifa Muhammad. So,
yes, sir.
Out today, please send a prayer out to the family, and if you have any connection with the family in Atlanta, please send your prayers of condolence and whatever else that you can possibly do. So, with that, once again, I want to thank you all. I want to thank all of the listeners tonight. And I want to thank Brother Sabir, who is in the hiding right now. He's got that Dallas Cowboys thing up there. I'm not a sports fan, but I know he loves them Cowboys. So I would like to thank him. He does so much behind the scene. There he is. He does so much behind the scene to make this happen. And once again, I would like to thank our sponsors who have helped us with the financial aspect of what it is we do with our granting. And that is the Office of Violence Prevention and the Urban Affairs Coalition here in Philadelphia. So thank you. And as we close, as we leave you, we like to say, as we came before you, love and peace in the Arabic language of Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Good night.
All right, fam, we are no longer live. Oh, wait. Oh, no, we're still live.
We'll know in a minute. Great session.
Yes, sir.
Great session.